Evelyn Harper had been sitting there for 47 minutes. The coffee in front of her had gone cold. Outside, Christmas lights blinked red and gold through frosted windows. Inside the cafe on Maple Street, the air smelled like cinnamon, wet coats, and quiet judgment. People whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. A woman alone on Christmas Eve, in heels, in a tailored coat worth more than most people's rent. Everyone assumed she'd been stood up. The barista had already offered her a second cup, on the house. Pity served warm. Evelyn glanced at her phone again. No messages, no calls, just silence. She told herself she didn't care. She was used to people wasting her time. Boardrooms were full of men who talked too much and promised too little. Waiting was weakness. That's what her ex-husband used to say right before he walked out of her penthouse for the last time. You never wait for anyone, Eve, and no one ever waits for you. She swallowed the memory like bitter medicine and looked back at the door. This date had been a favor to her best friend, nothing more. A nice guy, she was told. A single father. Not her world, not her type. Evelyn had almost canceled 3 times. She had a company to run, a PR disaster smoldering in her inbox, and a holiday she planned to spend alone anyway. So why was she still here? At minute 47, just as she slid her chair back, the cafe door burst open. Cold air rushed in. Snow followed. The man who stumbled inside looked like he'd battled the storm and barely won. His jacket was soaked through. His boots tracked slush across the floor. Dark curls clung to his forehead. He stood there for half a second, scanning the room with panic in his eyes. And then he saw her. Relief hit his face so hard it almost knocked him over. He crossed the cafe in quick, uneven steps. People stared. He didn't belong here. Not in this quiet, polished place. And certainly not at her table. I'm so sorry, he said, breathless. I'm Marcus. I was at the hospital. My daughter... Evelyn stood without thinking. Up close, she saw it, the exhaustion, the fear, the guilt all over his face. She's okay now, he added quickly. I wouldn't be here if she wasn't. Silence hung between them. 47 minutes of waiting suddenly became something else entirely. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn Harper didn't feel foolish for staying. She felt curious. Marcus stood there, still dripping onto the cafe floor, clutching the strap of his worn backpack like it was the only steady thing he had left. Evelyn watched him in silence. Most men rushed to explain when they were late. He didn't rush. He just looked wrecked. I tried to text, he said quietly. The signal in the ER waiting room is awful. She had a fever that wouldn't break. I thought I was going to lose her tonight. Evelyn's chest tightened. The fever finally dropped an hour ago, he added. She's home now, sleeping. My neighbor's checking on her. The barista appeared with a towel. Marcus thanked him like the man had just saved his life. He dried his hands, his face, the back of his neck. Slow, careful movements. Working hands, Evelyn noticed. Calloused. Honest. You didn't have to wait, he said, glancing at the empty cup and then at her. Most people would have left. Evelyn surprised herself by answering honestly. I almost did. He nodded. Fair. Something shifted in the air. The apology was real, no excuses, no charm, just truth. So, Marcus gestured awkwardly at the chair. If you're still willing, Evelyn sat back down. I'm still here. The barista returned. Marcus ordered water. Just water. His eyes skimmed over the menu like the prices physically hurt to look at. Evelyn noticed. She always noticed these things. How is she now? Evelyn asked. Marcus's face softened instantly. Stubborn, still bossy, still my whole world. That answer landed harder than any practiced compliment ever had. I'm Evelyn, she said. I know, he replied. My daughter made me memorize your name this morning. She said I couldn't mess this up twice. Evelyn's lips curved despite herself. Twice? I once showed up late to her school play. She never lets me forget it. For the first time that night, he smiled. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt the thick wall between her world and someone else's crack. Just a little. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe's soft music filled the space between their breaths. Outside, snow drifted lazily past the windows, blurring the Christmas lights into soft halos. Marcus finally broke the silence. So, what do you do, Evelyn? She hesitated. People always changed when she answered that question. Their shoulders stiffened, their eyes sharpened, their tone shifted. I run a company, she said simply. He nodded like that was enough. That sounds exhausting. The word surprised a quiet laugh out of her. It is. He studied her for a beat, then gestured to his hands. I fix broken pipes for a living. Sometimes toilets. Sometimes things people don't want to talk about. Plumber? She asked. Yeah, used to be an architect, though. That caught her attention. Used to be? My wife got sick, he said, voice steady but distant. Cancer. By the time she passed, the bills were crushing us. Plumbing paid faster. So I switched. Evelyn felt something tighten behind her ribs. I'm sorry. He shook his head gently. It was 3 years ago. It still hurts. Just in quieter ways now. They sat with that truth between them. And you, Ma? He asked. Why the blind date on Christmas Eve? She let out a slow breath. Because I'm tired of being alone in rooms full of people. He nodded like he understood too well. My daughter pushed me to come, he added with a faint smile. She said I looked lonely lately. Kids always know, Evelyn said. Marcus glanced down at his phone. She told me to be brave tonight. Evelyn's throat tightened. Are you? He met her gaze. I showed up, didn't I? That landed deeper than she expected. You waited, he added quietly. I did. Why? Evelyn searched for the answer inside herself. Past the pride, past the walls, past the comfort of control. I think, she said slowly, I was hoping someone would finally show up for me. Marcus didn't reply right away. He just nodded, eyes soft. For the first time that night, the distance between their two worlds didn't feel so wide. Marcus's phone buzzed softly on the table. He glanced at the screen, and every line of tension in his face shifted at once. It's Lily, he said, already swiping to answer. Evelyn watched as his shoulders relaxed the moment his daughter's face appeared on the screen. Daddy? Lily's voice was small but bright. I'm here, sweetheart, Marcus said gently. How are you feeling? A little better, she whispered. Mrs. Turner gave me soup. It was salty. That means you're healing, he joked. Lily giggled, then peered closer at the screen. Is that her? Marcus glanced at Evelyn. Yeah, that's her. Lily tilted her head. Is she nice? Evelyn's breath caught without warning. Marcus smiled softly. She waited for me. That tells me a lot. Lily studied Evelyn seriously. Daddy doesn't like being alone. He pretends he does, but he doesn't. Evelyn felt the words settle deep in her chest. I'll be home soon, Marcus said. You rest, okay? Okay, Daddy? Lily hesitated. Don't mess this up. Marcus laughed quietly, emotion shaking behind it. I won't. The call ended. Silence filled the space again. But it was different now. Warmer, heavier. She's 7, Marcus said, and somehow wiser than me. Evelyn nodded. She loves you. I know, that's what scares me sometimes. Evelyn looked at him carefully. You don't have to be fearless to be a good father. You just have to stay. He met her eyes, something raw passing between them. I should go home, he said softly. I don't like leaving her too long. Evelyn hesitated only a second. I'll ride with you. Marcus blinked. You don't have to. I know, she said, but I want to. Outside, snow continued to fall, steady and quiet. And for the first time that night, neither of them felt quite so alone walking into it. The city felt different from the bus window. Evelyn sat near the back beside Marcus, her hands folded neatly in her lap as the old bus rumbled through streets coated in white. Neon signs blurred behind fog glass. Families passed by in warm silhouettes behind living room windows. Dinner tables, laughter, places she usually only passed on the way to somewhere else. She had ridden in limos and black SUVs for years. This felt real. Marcus didn't try to fill the silence. His knee bounced lightly with restless energy. Every few minutes, he checked his phone as if sheer will could make it buzz. She always worries when I'm gone too long, he said quietly, ever since her mom passed. Evelyn turned toward him. That's because you're her whole world. He gave a tired half smile. Sometimes I wish I could give her more than just me. The bus hit a bump. Evelyn reached out without thinking and steadied herself against the seat. Her fingers brushed Marcus's sleeve. Both of them froze for the briefest second before she pulled back. Neither mentioned it. She doesn't need more, Evelyn said softly. She needs you. Marcus swallowed. You make it sound simple. It's not, she admitted, but neither is being alone. The bus slowed at a red light. Snow fell thicker now, quiet and relentless. Marcus studied her profile, the sharp lines of a woman who had learned how to survive without leaning on anyone. You didn't have to come with me. I know, she replied. I'm starting to prefer choices that scare me. That made him laugh under his breath. Then you picked the right ride. The bus groaned to a stop. This is us, Marcus said, standing. Evelyn followed him down the narrow aisle and into the cold. The apartment building was old red brick with white trim and a dim porch light fighting against the storm. It wasn't impressive, but for the first time that night, Evelyn felt like she wasn't stepping into someone else's life anymore. She was stepping into a moment that might change her own. The stairwell smelled faintly of old wood and someone's late dinner, garlic and onions lingering in the air. The steps creaked under their feet as Marcus led the way up to the second floor. Evelyn followed, her heels suddenly out of place on worn concrete. Marcus unlocked the door quietly and pushed it open. Warmth spilled out. The apartment was small but lived in. A soft lamp glowed in the corner. Shoes were lined neatly by the door, and near the window stood a Christmas tree, crooked, handmade, stitched together from cardboard and construction paper, covered in glittery ornaments that clearly didn't come from a store. "It's beautiful," Evelyn whispered before she could stop herself. Marcus smiled faintly. Lily made most of it. On the couch, bundled beneath a mountain of blankets, Lily slept. Her cheeks were still pink from the fever. A cartoon played softly on the TV, forgotten. Marcus moved toward her on instinct, pressing the back of his hand to her forehead. His shoulders loosened with relief. "Still warm," he murmured, "but better." Evelyn watched the way he tucked the blanket around his daughter with slow, careful hands, like he was holding the world together, one quiet motion at a time. "She looks like you," Evelyn said. "She looks like her mom," Marcus replied softly. "Same stubborn chin." Lily stirred, her eyelids fluttering. "Daddy," she whispered. "I'm right here, baby." Her gaze drifted past him, straight to Evelyn. No fear, no hesitation, just sleepy curiosity. "Are you the lady from the cafe?" Evelyn knelt beside the couch. I'm Evelyn." "I'm Lily," she said proudly, then coughed into her blanket. Marcus leaned closer. "You need to rest." Lily nodded, then added sleepily, "You didn't mess it up, Daddy." Marcus's throat tightened. Evelyn felt her own chest ache in response. In that tiny room, beneath paper stars and flickering lights, something quiet began to change. Lily's eyes struggled to stay open, but her voice had energy again. "Did you bake cookies yet?" she asked from the couch. Marcus hesitated. "Not tonight, baby, you're sick." Her lower lip trembled just a little. "But it's Christmas Eve." Evelyn's heart tightened. She moved toward the tiny kitchen without fully thinking it through. She opened the fridge, scanned the shelves. Butter, eggs, half a bag of flour folded over with a clip, sugar in a chipped container. "What if we make them here?" Evelyn said carefully. "And Lily can be the boss from the couch." Lily's face lit up like the tree beside her. "I can still help?" Marcus looked at Evelyn, surprised. "You really don't have to." "I want to," she said. And for once it wasn't a reflex, it was the truth. They moved through the kitchen in awkward rhythm. Marcus measured. Evelyn stirred. Lily directed everything from her blanket like a tiny general. "More sugar, Daddy." "No, that's already more." Flour floated through the air like soft snow. Butter smudged Evelyn's sleeve. She laughed before she could stop herself, a sound that startled all three of them. The first batch came out uneven and slightly burned around the edges. Lily declared them perfect anyway. Marcus carried one to her. She took a tiny bite, then held it out. For Evelyn. Evelyn took a cautious taste. Too sweet, a little raw in the middle, and somehow it was the best thing she'd had in years. "See," Lily said proudly, "Christmas magic." Marcus watched them both, eyes shining with something quiet and overwhelmed. Evelyn caught his gaze across the counter. For a moment, neither of them looked away. In that small kitchen with broken cookies and borrowed warmth, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Soft, uncertain, and real. For the first time in a very long time, she wasn't thinking about leaving. The cookies steamed on a chipped plate between them. Lily's eyelids drooped again, heavy with sleep and medicine. Marcus lifted her carefully, settling her back against the pillows. "I'm not tired yet," she murmured, fighting it. "Yes, you are," he said softly, "and that's okay." Lily's gaze slid to Evelyn, studying her with the serious focus only a child could manage. "Are you going to leave soon?" The question landed without warning. Evelyn froze. Marcus stiffened beside the couch. "I don't know," Evelyn answered honestly. "Do you want me to?" Lily nodded, slow and certain. "Daddy gets quiet when people leave. He tries to smile, but he doesn't really mean it." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. "Lily," he started. "She's not wrong," Evelyn said gently. Lily reached out, her small hand slipping into Evelyn's sleeve. "If you stay, Daddy won't be lonely on Christmas." Evelyn's throat tightened so fast she could barely breathe. I have a whole apartment, she began weakly. A really big one. Lily considered that. Is there a tree? No. Then this is better, Lily decided. Marcus knelt beside the couch, voice trembled despite his effort to steady it. You don't have to stay because she asked. Evelyn looked at him. The tired strength in his face, the fear behind his eyes, the man who had shown up soaked in snow just to keep a promise. I'm not staying because she asked, she said quietly. I'm staying because I want to. Lily broke into a sleepy smile. Good. Then we're a team. Minutes later, she drifted off, fingers still curled in Evelyn's sleeve. Evelyn didn't move. Across the room, Marcus whispered, Thank you. And for the first time that night, Evelyn didn't feel like a guest in someone else's life. She felt like she'd chosen where she belonged. Morning light filtered softly through the thin curtains. Evelyn woke on the couch with a blanket tucked around her shoulders. For one disoriented second, she didn't know where she was. Then she saw the crooked paper Christmas tree by the window, and Lily standing beside it in oversized pajamas. Santa came, Lily whispered urgently. You have to hurry. Evelyn pushed herself upright. Her phone buzzed somewhere in her bag, forgotten. For the first time in years, she didn't reach for it. Marcus stood in the kitchen pouring coffee. When he saw her awake, he mouthed a quiet, apologetic smile. Under the tree were a few small gifts wrapped in newspaper and twine. Nothing shiny, nothing expensive. Lily handed Evelyn one last package, smaller than the rest. This one is yours, she said proudly. I made it before I got sick, but Daddy wrapped it. Evelyn's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a cookie, heart-shaped, carefully sealed in plastic. Red frosting spelled out shaky little letters. Thank you for waiting. The room blurred instantly. Evelyn covered her mouth, breath caught in her chest. Lily climbed into her lap. Daddy said waiting is what people do when they really care. Evelyn couldn't speak. She just held the cookie in one hand and Lily in the other, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. Across the room, Marcus watched them, his eyes wet and unguarded. They spent the morning together, opening simple gifts, eating cookies for breakfast, laughing at nonsense jokes Lily told with total seriousness. It wasn't the Christmas Evelyn had planned. There were no catered brunches, no champagne flutes, no skyline views. But for the first time in a long time, her heart felt full instead of hollow. Late morning, her phone buzzed again. She finally checked it. 10 missed calls, all from the life she had left outside. Evelyn looked at Marcus, then at Lily still tangled in blankets and ribbons. And for the first time, she didn't know which world she wanted anymore. Evelyn stood by the small kitchen window while Marcus washed the breakfast dishes. Snow kept falling outside, quiet and steady, like the world was holding its breath. Her phone vibrated again in her hand. Work, reality, the life that had never waited for anyone. You don't have to stay longer, Marcus said gently without turning around. I know you've got another world. She looked at his back, broad but tired. The man who had shown up late and dripping wet. The man who baked crooked cookies at midnight and tucked his daughter in with shaking hands. I don't know how to exist in worlds that don't touch anymore, she admitted. Marcus turned off the sink and faced her. You don't owe us anything, Evelyn. I don't want you to stay out of guilt. That's not why I'm here. Silence stretched between them. He swallowed. I get scared of the difference, of what people will say when they look at us, of what I can't give you. Evelyn stepped closer. Marcus, I've had everything people chase, and I was still empty. He searched her face. And now? Now I'm scared, she said softly, but I feel alive. He let out a quiet breath. I don't want Lily getting attached just to get hurt. Evelyn's voice steadied with a truth she hadn't fully realized until that moment. Neither do I. They stood there, two people balanced on the edge of very different lives. Marcus finally asked, almost in a whisper, Are you going back today? Evelyn glanced at her phone one last time. Then she silenced it and slipped it into her bag. Not today. His shoulders dropped slightly, relief flashing through his eyes before he could hide it. Across the room, Lily stirred on the couch. Daddy, she murmured, is she staying? Marcus looked at Evelyn instead of answering. Evelyn knelt beside the couch and brushed a curl from Lily's forehead. For today, sweetheart, I'm staying. Lily smiled in her sleep. Marcus closed his eyes. And for the first time since his wife died, the future didn't feel like something he had to face alone. Time didn't change everything at once. It changed it quietly. Evelyn started by staying an extra day, then another. Then she stopped counting. She answered emails from Marcus's kitchen table while Lily colored beside her. Conference calls happened with the hum of cartoons in the background, At night, she fell asleep to the sound of someone else breathing in the next room. And for the first time, that sound felt like comfort, not interruption. Marcus watched her try to fit into their rhythm without forcing it. She learned quickly how Lily liked her cereal dry but her milk cold, how Marcus drank his coffee black, no sugar, how the apartment filled with light every afternoon right before sunset. They didn't rush the word family. They built it in small, unremarkable ways. 3 months later, Evelyn put her penthouse on the market. The decision felt reckless and strangely obvious at the same time. She stood in rooms made of glass and silence and realized none of it felt like home anymore. Marcus returned to architecture little by little, drawing in the evenings after Lily fell asleep. Just sketches at first, then real plans, real hope. One afternoon, Lily burst into the living room waving a piece of paper. "Daddy, Miss Evelyn, look!" It was a drawing of a house, yellow walls, a big kitchen, a dog that looked suspiciously like a balloon with legs, and 3 stick figures holding hands out front. Marcus stared at it in silence. Evelyn knelt beside him. "She already sees it." He swallowed hard. "I'm scared to believe in it." "That's how you know it matters," she said. Later that night, after Lily slept, Marcus showed Evelyn the first real floor plan he'd drawn in years. A modest house, bright windows, a kitchen big enough for chaos. "For all the cookies," he said quietly. Evelyn touched the paper, then his hand. "Let's build it," she said. He didn't answer right away, just nodded, eyes wet. They still didn't know what forever would look like. But for the first time, they were brave enough to imagine it. The house wasn't finished when they first moved in. There were still boxes in the hallway, paint cans in the corner. The porch light flickered when the wind was strong, but Lily ran through the front door like she had owned the place her whole life. "This is it," she announced. "This is our house." Marcus stood frozen in the doorway for a long moment, keys shaking slightly in his hand. He had designed this place line by line, late at night after Lily fell asleep, never fully believing it would become real. Evelyn stepped up beside him and slipped her hand into his. "Welcome home," she said. For the first time since his wife passed away, Marcus let himself believe the word. That first night, they sat on the kitchen floor eating takeout from paper boxes because the dining table hadn't arrived yet. Lily was too excited to sit still, bouncing between them, talking about how her room was the color of sunshine and how she wanted a dog next. Evelyn watched them. This man who once apologized for taking up space, this child who once feared being left alone, and felt her chest fill with something steady and fragile and strong all at once. Later that night, after Lily finally fell asleep in her new bed, Marcus and Evelyn stood on the unfinished porch, wrapped in the same blanket. "I used to think waiting was losing," Evelyn said quietly. "Like time was a debt you never got back." Marcus looked at the yard, empty and waiting to be filled with life. "And now? Now I think waiting is how you prove something matters." He turned toward her. "I was terrified you'd leave. I was terrified to stay," she admitted, "but staying changed me." Marcus reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I don't know how to be the man you deserve." Evelyn shook her head. "You already are. You showed up, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard." Their kiss wasn't dramatic, no sweeping music, no fireworks. Just 2 wounded people choosing each other without running. Inside, Lily stirred and called out in her sleep, "Don't forget, we're a family now." Evelyn let out a soft, broken laugh and rested her head against Marcus's shoulder. "She's right." Snow began to fall again, light and steady, the kind that doesn't demand attention but changes everything it touches. From one late arrival, from 47 minutes of waiting, from 2 lonely lives colliding in a small cafe, a family was born. And sometimes the most ordinary moments turn out to be the ones that save us. Now let me ask you something. Right where you are watching this, if you were Evelyn, would you have waited? And if you were Marcus, would you believe in love again? If this story touched your heart, don't walk this road alone. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story about healing, hope, and the quiet miracles that change ordinary lives forever.